I don't want to say it's convoluted, but the book has twists and turns that at times make you think everything's been flipped upside down. And so you kind of latch on to characters at the beginning of the story. You feel like you know where everything is. And then by the end of the story, you're kind of hard pressed to hold on to them because they're not quite who you thought. And the book takes place over the course of like 6 or 7 years. So it's not like I'm trying to change their character overnight, but they've gone through a lot of pain and suffering in those 5, 6, 7 years. And that's why they gradually are making this change. And as a reader, we read it over the course of a week, and those characters make those changes, and you're thinking, well, really? Can that really happen? And I think the message I want to send is that we are complicated beings, and who you are at 25 may be totally different from who you are at 35 or 40, or from 35 to 45. And that the changes that happen in our lives are very much dependent on the people we let into our lives. And in this story, people enter other people's lives uninvited. And because of that, they change.
Okay, Maria, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. It's the Author Podcast where we get to talk to amazing authors from around the world. Eric's here with us today. His book is coming out in a few weeks at the time of recording, so I'm excited for that, and I'm excited to connect with Eric, hear more about the story, his journey as an author. As you listen as a fellow author, take away some nuggets from Eric on his journey, and as a reader, a new book for you to fall in love with, a new author to add to your collection. Eric, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. Glad to have you on the show.
Thank you, Dave.
Excellent, Eric. Tell everybody where you are in this big, amazing world of ours.
I'm in San Diego.
There you go.
Yes, it's quite nice right now. I won't rub it in anyone's nose, but I did pay my dues. I was born in New York City and was there until 25, 28. And so I dealt with lots of 3-foot snowdrifts and horrible city life and, nice city life, lots of cultural opportunities. But now I'm in San Diego and it's a different world, but I'm enjoying it.
I was watching the clips online of everyone in New York with that big snowstorm that went through recently. Everyone's got a shovel trying to dig the city out. I'm like, wow, it's a lot. Times Square was just a winter wonderland. I'm like, wow.
Our life.
Right? And for a city that has to move all the time, they don't have weekends where they shut the city down so they can do stuff like that. So that's pretty amazing. So yeah, I love New York. It's a great city.
I don't think people in San Diego or places like San Diego appreciate how paralyzing it is to have to shovel your car out before you should use it.
Right. Yeah. Up here in Canada, we identify with that, but no, it's great. It sounds like you have a beautiful place to live. I got to come sometime and enjoy the beauty of your part of the world. It sounds great. Yeah, Eric, so we have authors that listen to the show, Eric. They come here to connect with a fellow author. The authors that are listening, they're just starting out, though. They've never done this before. They've got a couple words, they got an idea, a concept, but here you are with a book launching in a few weeks, and there's authors listening that would love to trade places with you and be at this point in their journey as an author. Anything you can give to a new author listening to inspire them, encourage them to continue writing, to take that idea and make it a reality? What would you say to a new author listening?
Well, there's a lot I've learned. I've been at this now for 7 years, give or take. And I would say the first thing to keep in mind is to not think about publishing, to write for the joy of writing. As a matter of fact, sort of convince yourself that you have no intentions of publishing, that you really just want to create something like an artist would go down into their basement and put oil on canvas and then stick it in a closet and never want to show it to anyone. It could be a masterpiece, but they didn't do it to bring it to a gallery. They did it just to express something inside them that they had to get out. And I think that keeping that focus allows the creative juices to stay untainted with the stresses of, are people going to want to read this? You know, is an agent going to like this? Is a publishing company going to think this will make money? Those are issues that have nothing to do with the creative process. And you'll never be able to control those variables. All you can do is be true to yourself and make something that is really unique. And if agents and publishers see your, you know, creative genius, which is, a creative genius of one, what you can make for you based on your perspective, then great. And if they don't see it, you put it in the closet and you wait 6 months. And if you're someone who enjoyed that process, you'll start writing again. You'll be sitting in a park, you'll see a bird land on the back of a chair, and all of a sudden you'll conjure up a character who's waiting for, a spy to come and drop some information, and off you run. And then you run home and you get on the computer and you start typing again. And it's like that part you'll actually enjoy. And it should never be tainted with the business side of writing and publishing, because I don't think it helps you with the product you're trying to produce. The product has to come from a love for just putting words on paper.
Interesting.
And you just need to be good at that.
Yeah. So not writing specifically for success, not writing for attention, especially for a new author, like not being your end goal. Like, I just got to write something that's trendy or popular. That's the whole reason I'm writing. It's not the fact that I love writing and I want to tell a story. It's just I'm trying to get to this imagined goal, because that may or may not happen. And if you don't get to that goal, would you be a success then in your own mind if you don't get picked up or make $1 million, whatever that thing is, right? I love the idea of putting it away. Like, create for the sake of creating and see where it takes you. That's a great perspective, Eric. I like that.
I'm not an expert in this, but I've heard enough to get the impression that even established writers who force themselves to produce don't produce their best work. That something that comes through true inspiration at a later date or at an earlier date might be a really, ground shaking piece of creativity or creation art. But that if you were in the 1850s and you were getting paid by the page, and the magazine or periodical that was going to publish your book that was coming out chapter by chapter, and you had to get it out, you'd find that some of those chapters kind of meander, and, there's a lot of fluff, and, they have great points here and there, but, it's like there's a lot you could probably leave out. And that was because they had to write.
Yeah.
It was required.
Yeah. Eric, where do you draw inspiration from? Like, some people will be music, could be movies, other authors. What is it for you that just, when you feel like you need to top up that inspiration tank of yours, you have to go and find something that fills that up? Where would you go?
There are times when a particular genre of music, or maybe even a particular song, can sort of be like a muse. Not that it feeds a certain character, but maybe, the melody, the beat might be the tempo that your book kind of has, or whatever that music does feed you, it is equivalent to the tempo you have in your book. And every time you hear that song, it immediately puts you back in the book. Chapter 15, something happened. The music makes you want to just get to chapter 16 and move on. There's that, but that doesn't give you inspiration for a book. That just kind of, is the sofa, is the computer or the desk or the room or the environment that when you're in it, you're comfortable and your brain goes right back to work. I do think that reading other authors is probably the one form of inspiration that can be the most beneficial, at least for me, because I found I was never a big reader throughout my life. And some of that may be that my profession doesn't lend itself to, curling up with a good book, for hours on end. But in my later years when my kids were grown and I wasn't always rushing around to soccer practice or lacrosse or things like that, um, I started enjoying at least audible books because I had to be in my car for a half hour going, a half hour coming. And I often found that when I'm in a book, I get inspiration from the way characters do things, a twist that someone used that I don't copy, but the wheels start spinning. And for example, just recently, I'm working now on uh, not the next book after the one that's coming out, but one after that, where I reached a point where I thought, I'm done. I'm at 160 pages and I don't think there's any more gas in the engine. This one isn't going to turn out to be a book because it's kind of nice getting to this point, but I need something to take it to that last point. And I had no more ideas. And so I put it down and I've been listening to Le Carre, who, famous spy novel type person. And I've been listening to him for the sake of research and inspiration because the book that I'm writing is, it has to do with espionage. So I thought I would get in the mind of someone who kind of lived in that world and who's written a lot about it, just to see how he puts characters together and how they interact and how they undermine each other or have double meanings in the things that they're doing and how someone expresses those ideas. And sure enough, as I was driving home from work, I heard things in a character that all of a sudden triggered, like that snowball going downhill. And by the time I got home, I all of a sudden had 2 or 3 different venues or avenues that I could go off it. And maybe I'll use all 3 of them, but I'll do them sequentially or, double them up. And I felt like, oh, I just got, a booster shot to carry this story. And I still don't know how it's going to end. And that's typical. But I do know that I can give the reader more cliffhanging, excitement and anticipation and create the plot line that I've been working on, make it even deeper, more complex, and have the reader not really know where the heck this is going. Because when you're dealing with things like spy and espionage, if you can figure out the ending halfway through, you lose interest. Um, so I do think that reading can help you do that. And it's not plagiarism, as you know from music. You know, you hear riffs and certain melodies that, you don't even know that you're repeating them in some weird fashion. But it's not plagiarism. It's the way you build on what's been done.
I heard somebody talking about learning how to sing, and they said the way that they learn how to sing is to mimic another person, because it's going to help your mouth, your vocal cords, and how you actually perform. It'll give you a point of reference to do that copying. I think that we're all, Eric, like a mix of our inspirations all together. And your unique mix is different than any other author's unique mix, because it's based on your background, your career, your life story, who's inspired you, books you've read, music you've heard. That unique concoction of all those things makes you uniquely you and makes you different. Even though you could take the same influences and put it someone else through the same influences, they're going to have a different result, right?
I totally agree. You would certainly have to distinguish between the inspiration to write a particular book and the way you write the issues that book is going to talk about. The way you write those issues absolutely comes from your lived experience, and which is one of the reasons why, you can't really plagiarize someone else's work unless you're really writing word for word what they've written. The fact that you get an inspiration from someone else's book, it has to go through the filters of how you see the world, and what comes out in the end is totally different.
I think that we can both agree, for the author that's listening, that's maybe starting out, then lean into your unique voice, your unique story, because you are unique. And in a world where there's new books every second, your book will be standalone because no one's the unique combination that you are. So that's what makes going to make your book different than everyone else's.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Spot on.
Awesome. Great. Okay. There we go. We're done. Everybody. Thank you, everybody. No, this is good. Eric, let's talk about the book. It's coming out in March. I'm excited for you. What does it feel like to get to this stage in the process? Like, it's not out yet fully for everybody. It's going to be, but you're right on the edge of this being live everywhere. What are you nervous about? What are you excited about?
It is a surreal experience. What I'm nervous about, and I have to admit that it's appearing more pessimistic than optimistic, but what I'm nervous about is that a story that I wrote not intending to divide can divide. And it's not necessarily a political book, but people can see politics in anything. Um, it's it's a lived experience that people are having in the book where they put their values. And because it's a book, I have to create conflict. So I can't have, everyone agreeing with everyone. But I wanted to give each voice a true sense of perspective and be sincere or honest with each perspective, not uphold one at the expense of the other. I really wanted to give voice to both sides so that the world can see that as an author, I wasn't playing favorites, but at the same time, you can see how this will play out if you just go down this road to the nth degree. And it's not always peachy keen for what you might consider the good person, and the person who struggles to accept a different point of view, because that's basically what the book's about, points of view. The person who struggles to accept a different point of view, a lot of people could probably identify with her. And she struggles wanting things not to change, hoping that everything she's worked for, she's a successful businesswoman and she's an excellent mom and she's a community participant and, everything that we all look forward to participating in throughout our lives. She's all of them. And then she's asked to accept a different point of view. And naturally, you're going to say no to that. Who wouldn't say no to that? I think anyone from either side of any perspective would put themselves in her role and say, yeah, maybe I wouldn't be so keen on just jumping in the cold water. I might walk around the edges a little bit, tip my toe in there. I'll come back in a half hour. Maybe it'll warm. It's like we like to think that we're going to be the first ones at the front of the line to accept change, diversity, open arms. Well, but the reality is, even the most accepting of us will hesitate. We'll try to filter it through and blend it into something that we find more palatable. It's easy to be open-minded when you're reading it in the newspaper or watching on the news, but when it's next door to you, and that's what this book, it brings it home. These are people who could very well at a dinner table talk about something going on 3 states away and say, oh yeah, we should always be, X. But when it happens across the street, all of a sudden it's different. And we shouldn't deny the fact that, our world talks in terms of things like liberalism and conservatism, and we shouldn't speak as if a conservative person is viewing ideas that are sort of antithetical to the way we are. And the liberal person isn't always right about their views that seem very humane, inclusive and warm and friendly and everything, because, the book points out how you can be one at one point in your life and switch over to being the other at another point in your life, and that you will find some way to make that all seem like you're consistent. Your brain will do that over the course of 1 or 2 decades. And it's because we all want to be on the inside. When you're on the outside, and that's my background. And we talked about different perspectives. I grew up as, a child of immigrants, and I was very young when I was born. When they came here, I was soon after they came here. So I lived in a house with the food and, my aunts and uncles, and everything that I did was all about, my Jamaican heritage. And I knew I was different. People couldn't understand my mom whenever they came by to talk, and I had to translate for them. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's speaking English. It's like, but I felt insecure. And so, I know that feeling when you get off the boat and you don't speak the language and people look at you and say, you know, who are you? Why are you here on my land kind of thing. I kind of had a little bit of that growing up. And so I understand the perspective from the outside. And and so it's easy for me to take an issue and jump sides. I'm not stuck rigidly with one perspective. And and I think it's helpful. I think the purpose of the book is to give different points of view and to help people understand that the other side isn't undermining of everything that you stand for. That they have a humane, sincere reason for thinking that way. They're not weak. They're not naive. Um, and the person who's on the other side, again, they may want normalcy. They may want stability. You also want it. Don't tell me you don't want it. You do want it. We can point to areas in your life where you want it too. You're just being hypocritical and saying this verse, it's like, it's a messy world we live in, and our lives are messy, and we straddle that fence back and forth all the time between when we want and when we don't want. And it's a book that helps us remember that we're in that trading game throughout our entire lives. And we have excellent working sense of denial so that we can sort of cover up, behind us the past and not feel, like we're a sham trying to, create a charade and walk through life, two-faced all the time. We don't consider ourselves to be um, walking around, pulling the wool over everyone's eyes. We really think we're sincerely a true, honest person. And, if someone drew a line on all the things you've done in your life and saw how you jumped around back and forth, you'd probably be embarrassed. But nobody wants to uncover their past that way.
Yeah. Okay. All right. For your ideal reader, then, who are you envisioning as a reader for this new book that you're hoping to reach? And I guess as part two of that is, what's your message to them beyond what we've already talked about? How this book is designed for them. So who are you trying to reach, and what would you like to tell them about this book?
I've had to answer that question a few times. And I always find it interesting because I know that from a marketing perspective, they always want to know, the people who are responsible for that, they always want to know, who did you write this for? Because we want to sell it to them and we want to make money. And it's, but when you're writing, as I said before, you don't think about that. So you don't write for an audience. Maybe you do, obviously if you're writing a book for the youth department, you might specifically write that way, but you're not, I don't know necessarily that I'm writing for, you know, middle-aged women, in Midwestern America, you know, or the college educated crowd versus the blue collar working, it's like, I don't really know. I think if I had to frame it in terms that are meaningful to me, since I see this as a work of creativity intended to change people's lives, um, I would say that I'm hoping to get to people who are still amenable to change. And that could be a 65-year-old who's already retired and has been rigid in one particular way their whole life. And they read the book, and for the next 10 years, they realize, oh, maybe I can try something different, you know. But you could also be, an insightful 25-year-old who picks up the book on a plane and thinks, oh, well, all this stuff, this is about living in a suburban neighborhood with your own home and kids. And this isn't me. I'm 25, but you plant a seed, and they know that as they go through the rest of their lives, rest of their life, they understand the complexity of decisions that are going to be made in the future. And they're willing to hesitate and evaluate and maybe take in all sides and find middle ground or common ground. So I kind of feel like I want the people who are not so stuck in their ways that they can't see another perspective. And the book offers both perspectives and tries to make an argument for both perspectives of the issue that I present. And I don't really see an age group so much as I see a personality trait.
Okay, good.
Right.
Yeah.
And the second part of your question was,
Yeah, just what is your message to that person then about the book? Like, how can we, because they're listening, I want to make that really strong bond between a reader and your book and you. Like, what is your message to them directly about the book and your hopes for them, I guess?
the book is, I don't want to say it's convoluted, but the book has twists and turns that at times make you think everything's been flipped upside down. And so you kind of latch on to characters at the beginning of the story. You feel like you know where everything is. And then by the end of the story, you're kind of hard pressed to hold on to them because they're not quite who you thought. And the book takes place over the course of like 6 or 7 years. So it's not like I'm trying to change their character overnight. But they've gone through a lot of pain and suffering in those 5, 6, 7 years. And that's why they gradually are making this change. And as a reader, we read it over the course of a week, and those characters make those changes, and you're thinking, well, really? Can that really happen? And I think the message I want to send is that we are complicated beings. And who you are at 25 may be totally different from who you are at 35 or 40, or from 35 to 45. And that the changes that happen in our lives are very much dependent on the people we let into our lives. And in this story, people enter other people's lives uninvited. And because of that, they change. And the argument is made that the change is good, even though they resisted it. And so I would tell people that beware. Life is complicated. Change is coming. And the more you resist it, I think to a certain degree, the more painful the change process is. But change is going to happen. And so embrace it. And life can be so much more enjoyable, I think, if you actually seek it out. If everyone's going left, go right. If they tell you don't take that job, take that job. Travel to the country you least think you'd get something out of, and walk along the streets and find that everyone there is extremely friendly, and you're having dinner in someone's house. My wife went to Spain when she was in college, and people would call her off the street as she's walking by, and she'd go inside and sit down at a family table of 10, and they treated her like she was family, and she was just walking by on the street. It's like the things that are happening in this world that might make you change your perspective on the people in it. The whole idea is to undermine stereotypes and get people out there to just learn for themselves what's going on in the world. And they can make up their own mind about, what they value and who they value. And Um, but be open to change because it happens whether you want to accept it or not is a lesson I want to make.
So introduce us to your main characters here for the book as well. If you and I were at an event or something, and these two people walked in, and you're like, oh, they're here, and you had a chance to introduce me to them, how would you introduce them to me? Like, tell me what I need to know about them just socially, so that we can have a great conversation. How would you introduce them to me?
Well, the book starts with Claire, and you're in her mind.
Okay.
And she is sort of remiss about how things have gone. And I would describe her as there is a hardworking woman. She came from a family of, very educated people, and they have their own personal finance business. And so, of course, she got her degree in finance, and she's quite successful at it. You know, she works with all these men, but she is breaking the mold, and she has defined herself, and she's successful, and all of the things in their life, meaning her and her husband's life, um, that that they value, their home, the neighborhood, the schools their kids are going to a great extent, it's because of her. She's the architect for the structure you see around their lives. And and she's very proud. She likes things to be just right. And she prides herself on etiquette, propriety, and things of that nature. You could argue maybe she is a little bit of a um, showman. I say showman, but showwoman, or a little bit too caught up in appearances. You could make that point, but she's worked hard and she deserves to, drive a nice car and live in a nice neighborhood. I mean, that defines many of us, if not all of us, really. Um, Peter, on the other hand, went to the same college. That's where they met. Um, Came from a more, I don't want to say humble family, but less distinguished, let's just say. He grew up with a little bit more of a rough and tumble youth, got into trouble a lot, had to be saved by his father or his bigger brother to not, slip into the lake and drown and, other things. And so he kind of grows up a bit more seasoned in the reality of life than Claire. And because of that, he's less anxious. He's open to meeting new people, and a lot of it just has to do with how he grew up. A lot of her had to do with how she grew up. And they meet each other. And one of the things that Claire likes about Peter is that she's an up and coming, decisive woman. Peter is welcoming to that. He doesn't feel threatened. He's not in competition with her, maybe because of the way he grew up. His mother was a very strong personality, and he's accepting. And so they make a go of it. And she likes him because he is accepting, because he'll let her be her. So on a very fundamental level, they have this attraction. From that, you can imagine that they came from disparate backgrounds, and there's this chiasm where they crisscross and come from different backgrounds, but that's what made them compatible. And now as they go off into life, that compatibility, that crossing will last for a little bit, but he's going to continue to be who he is. And she's going to continue to be who she is, which means they're going to grow slowly more and more apart because fundamentally they are different people. And at the point in the book where the crisis happens, there is already a little bit of marital strain. Nothing to the point of wanting a divorce or anything crazy like that. But, you sense from Claire that she's a little frustrated with, Peter for not not helping out more and making the important decisions. She knows that she's sort of the one creating the foundation for everything that they value in that house. And he's just a guy who goes off and surfs every day, kind of, that sort of but he's living a life. He's enjoying it. He's, hanging out with the guys and doing all the fun things. And she's the one who's like, she's the developer. She works at the bank. She's, improving the civic world around her. And she's juggling all these balls. And he's a dad and he's working full time and he's doing his part. But she clearly feels like she's the architect here.
Hey, okay. And that, okay. And so that builds in some inherent conflict just in hearing that right there. So the two people on two different paths, yet they're together. And I could almost pick up on from that maybe a little bit of animosity from her perspective towards somebody who's not taking life seriously to the way she is, in a way where she feels like she's carrying the weight of everything and he's not contributing at all times. I think there's a lot of people that could identify with that, Eric. I think a lot of people could.
And I think that's one of the reasons why in the book, her initial response to this change that Peter is not responsible for, they're both, bystanders to this. But the reason why her response is so strong and negative and frustrating towards Peter is that she's already grown a little frustrated towards Peter.
Yeah.
And here comes something where she really just wants him to get on the bandwagon. Just stand with me for a change and let's just get through this. And yet again, this is one of those things where he's drifting even further apart from where she's at. And now she's just beside herself. And he's like, why is this such a big deal for you? This is not going to be a big deal. They're going to come, the people that moved in, they're going to blend into the neighborhood and it's just going to be great. And we're going to have barbecues and everything. It's like, and she's like, this is the last straw. You have been working hard for this family for a while. And now you're like abandoning us. And so I wanted a story where the past informs the present and shows you the trajectory for the future. And then I wanted to try to change it. What would it take to change that? How would that change look? What's required? First, you need time. I couldn't have a story that transpired over the course of 4 to 6 months. It had to be 4 to 6 years. It was also important for the story, though it doesn't start out in their youth, for the story to have an opportunity to reflect back on their youth. And for Peter, who goes to therapy to help deal with issues as they evolve, gets a chance to probe his youth. The therapist does that on his behalf, but the reader gets to learn what kind of kid he was, what kind of home he grew up in, and how his first instincts for dealing with conflict were handled because he watched how his dad handled conflict with his mom. And he was somewhat tempered by that experience and had to deal with conflict from his mom also because she was a strong personality. And so he developed a technique of don't confront, don't challenge, water going downhill, find the easiest path and kind of go around it. Don't try to change it. And lo and behold, he grows up and he gets married and he has a wife and 2 kids and, confrontation comes and his attitude is like water going downhill. I'm not going to stop. I'm not moving this boulder. I'm just going to go around it. Yeah, but her background was totally different. Her parents had control of everything. If she didn't get good grades in school, they wanted to have it out with the teacher. We're changing this. Because there's an A.
Yeah.
And so they have 2 fun, and you would say, well, how did they ever fall in love?
Mm.
And it's that interesting. I mean, we see that all the time.
Right.
People fall, you think, you go out to dinner with them and you think, I don't see it.
How does this work? Right. Yeah.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
But you need to understand their past
to
understand how they might possibly think, oh, well, he's a nice guy. He always opens the door for me. He listens to my opinions. He lets me talk. He doesn't go off on this, male bravado, testosterone. Just seems to be very calm and accepting of himself. He doesn't need to prove anything. I like that in a man. That's a modern man. And as a woman who's breaking through the glass ceiling, she was someone who, remember, I said that, there are times in your past when, if we look back at it, you were in a position where you needed people to accept you, even though you were different. And it was important for that character to be a female because I wanted her to be someone who had just successfully accomplished something that 10 or 20 years before might not have happened. To be a developer, banker, for a name brand and be out there rubbing elbows with the guys, trying to figure out what the next civic plan would be to develop the city. And she's at the table. Well, 10, 20 years ago, she wouldn't have been at the table. And points where you feel like she's a little sensitive that some of that is still lingering, but she doesn't see her past. Denial, kind of that wall is there. And she doesn't see it at all. She sees herself as an accomplished ball wrecker. And she's already made that change. The character who comes across the street, the two characters, the husband and wife, but in particular, the husband, is going to go through the same thing. He's going to go through exactly what Claire went through. And in many ways, the two characters in the book that are most alike is Claire and the husband of the family that moves in. They're similar personality traits. They're go-getters. They just want to be on the inside looking out. They want to be a part of the mover and shakers. And when they get there, they forget their past and how they got there. And they enjoy being, on the inside. And then Peter and the wife, Margaret, of the couple that moves in, are both these calm, reflective, easygoing, at least on the outside, but, very self-satisfied. They don't need much from the world. They don't ask much from the world. They're just warm, friendly people. How do they become that? You don't really know. You get a little inkling of that from Peter's past, but so you have these two characters, and you would think that Claire and Peter would be the most alike, and that Jerome and Margaret would be the most alike, the two neighbors. Actually, the man and woman, and the man and women, and they're, and the book moves forward, and so you get to see this. You get to see it twice. If you're listening, you'll see that Claire has already had her moment, the other, and hope that people will give her the opportunity. And she's smart, and she's got everything that's required to get there, especially the pedigree. She had both parents who were kind of along that line, and she's good at it. And at this point, she's proven it. She has nothing to feel regretful about. And Jerome is the same way, only he's still earlier on. He's an engineer, he gets a job, he's successful, and he just wants the American dream. He just wants to have a house in a suburban community and send his kid to a good school and yada, yada, yada. And that's the conflict. Can he achieve the same goals that Claire achieved 10 or 20 years before? And will the community allow it? And what does that look like? And of course, there were many women before Claire that tried to accomplish that goal, and they didn't get it. Back 40 years or so, they didn't get it. She comes along at the right time in the right place, and she's able to sort of eke out a life. And her daughter might even have an easier time of it. It's the American way. It's the way of the world. Change is happening. It's happening around you. Whether you want to accept it or not, it's going to happen. And that's so. Sometimes I didn't realize it when I was writing the book, but I look back and I think, gosh, Eric, that was a lot of heavy lifting. there. You're asking people to really stick with it and be open and to scratch the surface and look into their own lives. And, it is asking a lot, but I wasn't thinking about publishing. And I sometimes look back and I think, I could have made this a little bit easier if I really was just thinking about, you know, who's my target audience and what do they, you know what I mean? Uh, there are ways in which you could have said, no, maybe there's too many twists and turns and leave out the background stuff and just, hit the ground running and keep running. You could have maybe made some of those changes, but the reality is I had to write what I had to write. I couldn't, I couldn't know I wanted to go in a certain direction and then go in a different direction. It just would have been sinful to me. I mean, you can always do it,
Yeah.
but then you feel like it's a charade.
Yeah.
You just,
It's interesting as we listen back in my mind when we talked when we first started. You talked about your family coming to the U.S. and looking for acceptance in a different world, and people seeing your family as different, right? And then I'm listening to you talk about your character, and it sounds like they're also wrestling with the idea of acceptance when people view you as different, right? And trying to find your path and kind of find that spot where you feel like you belong, right? And it seems like there's like a parallel between your own personal story and your character's story here a little bit too, as we kind of talk through this.
very true. And I've read that once you've read someone's book, you've read all their books.
Oh, that's a good line, Eric. I like that.
And because if you're true to the art, you write from your heart.
Yeah.
Music from your heart,
Yeah.
you write books from your heart, you paint from your heart, and that heart isn't changing. And I've written another book that is in the editing phase, and I'm sort of halfway through this third book. And when I look at the main protagonists in all three of them, they're all people who are outside looking in. The second book is about a doctor who's maybe on the spectrum. You know, uh, he just doesn't quite have the social skills that other people have. Brilliant, but just doesn't fit in. And in a place where you have to communicate ideas and plans, patient care plans, to get more technical. Uh, in a place where you have to be able to do that and win the confidence of consultants and family members, he's at a loss. He has to struggle to be seen as just normal and competent when really he's quite elevated in terms of competency. And that's kind of what the book is about. People not jumping to conclusion and drawing stereotypes and whatever, and realizing that sometimes, the person you think you don't want to take care of you in that case is the person. It's not always going to look like it does on TV. You know, um, and this last one is also it's a character who is an immigrant. This one is kind of, his character is similar to mine in that he claims to be essentially just off the boat, born within a year or two of being here. And he's a journalist, and his wife is a Navy pilot. And so she's very ensconced in the American tradition. She has 3 generations back, and, he's just off the boat and he's hoping to essentially not be noticed. It's like he just wants to fit in. And he wants to be successful, obviously, but, his wife is quite the opposite. She's very comfortable in the Navy. She's got a long family tradition in the Navy. She's very well regarded by her colleagues in the Navy. And whenever she socializes with them, she's just out there and, rubbing elbows and, all that kind of stuff. And he's sort of quietly moving around, trying not to be noticed, but still be successful. And a lot of that just comes from that inherent insecurity that he feels very much like an immigrant. And so it's a story about how immigrants move through this world, especially in America, where there is this promise, there's this Statue of Liberty promise of bring us, you're tired and you're hungry, and we will give you that opportunity to succeed. And he can't claim he's not succeeding, but apparently just getting a job and bringing in an income isn't all there is to succeeding. You kind of want the benefits of society welcoming you, not pointing a finger at you, not jumping to conclusions when things happen. And in that book that I'm working on, things do happen. And authorities start looking into people's past. And of course, he's the red herring. Why? Well, who knows? Maybe it's because he's sort of like the immigrant. He doesn't fit in and he's feeling it. And he's like, well, what do I got to do? It's like, I was born here, for crying out loud. And you're still making me feel like I don't belong, and I'm a successful journalist. I mean, I write for a good newspaper. He's like, give me a break. And yet he's still on the outside. And so it challenges the reader to say, yeah, I like this guy. He's a nice guy. He's a good guy. Look at all the things that he's doing. But why are the FBI treating him the way they're treating him? It's like, and to be fair, we're kind of seeing some of that right now. We're with what's happening with ICE and a bunch of other things, we're seeing sometimes people who we would normally identify with wholeheartedly be treated as if they were caught in the middle of the Rio Grande, with no papers, trying to break in through the back door. And they're being treated just like that. And not to say that treating that is okay, but things are complicated in America, and even people who are kind of okay with immigration on certain levels would agree that someone who's working in a restaurant in Minnesota who has a green card or, something like that shouldn't be rough handled, that there should be a difference between the way they're treated and the way someone at the border is treated. You don't have to be conservative or liberal to think that way. And so it does beg the question, what does America do when the chips are down? What do we do during World War I or World War II when our backs are up against the wall? Not that we're up against the wall now in 2026, mind you, but imagine a scenario. The rules change. People could care less about what the Statue of Liberty says. During World War II, we interred people, for the sake of whatever you want to call, and those people were not just Japanese. There were Italians who were interred, and they were, it was the country took drastic measures to, they would say, protect our people, protect the national interest, et cetera, et cetera. But during those years, you would look at America and you would say, wow, this isn't the America I grew up with. I didn't know we would do these sort of things. And so most Americans accepted it, didn't out of your political persuasion, you just kind of accepted it. And I think today, many Americans are kind of just accepting everything that's going on. There are some rebellious, demonstrations going on in places to try to push back and say, no, this is wrong. This is crossing a line. But, for the most part, Americans are not out in the street demonstrating like when they overthrew, Russian governments and Russian political places, back when the Iron Curtain came down. And so it's an interesting story. But once again, I want people to keep thinking about the perspective that is the less popular perspective, because the values, I forget who said this, it was a popular saying, but the values that you have for the least of us define the values that you have for the rest of us. And if you can't have respect, at least for people who don't look like you, and you might think you have respect for your neighbor who looks exactly like you, but it's not going to be the same kind of respect.
Yeah. Amazing. So we have lots to look forward to from you beyond your first book coming out soon, everybody. There's a lot more coming down the road for us as readers, which is exciting as well. So I'm excited to see where this all leads, Eric. This sounds really good.
Well, you'll have to have me back.
Oh, there you go. I like that idea. That's a great idea. Eric, for the readers and listeners, they want to come and follow your journey. Where would you like to send them so they can stay up to date on this project and all the new ones coming down the road? Where would you like to send the listener?
EricClarkAuthor.com is a webpage, and it's also my Instagram handle. And I do have a Facebook page, under the same title. So traditional 3.
It's great, Eric. I love the concept from the book. I love how you've created these characters and the dynamics between the two of them in this first book and where you're heading too. You've touched on something that's very, very appropriate for the times we're in right now. And I think anything that furthers the conversation and gives us new perspective helps when people are quick to pick a side and not listen, right? So I think these books and what you're writing really opens the door for people to even evaluate their own beliefs and their own approach to how we deal with each other. And for people who come to this country and don't feel accepted right away, I think these books would be a great companion for them as well, because they can really identify with that feeling of being in a strange land with a bunch of strange people and not knowing where we fit. And like you mentioned, for your mother, having to interpret for your mother with other people, it's like, I don't understand why we're just like you, right? So I think that feeling is going to translate for a lot of people as they read through the book. So I love having you on the show, Eric. Come back again, like you mentioned. I'd love to have you back, and so we'll celebrate the next thing. That's why it's called Living the Next Chapter, and I'm excited to have you back in the future. So thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on the new book. I'm hoping that everyone that's listening will go and buy their copy and leave you an outstanding review as well, talking about the characters, talking about the story, and what resonates with them as a reader. That's my encouragement for everyone. Go support our amazing authors, Eric. It's amazing. I'm so excited for you, and I hope much success finds you, Eric, as a writer, as you continue to share your stories for the right reason. I like that.
Thank you, Dave. I'm honored.
Excellent. Everyone, all the information as always in the show notes. Please go over, let Eric know. You've heard him on the show. Follow him on his social platforms as well. And encourage Eric anytime you can to continue writing. We need great authors like Eric in this world. Thank you, Eric, so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Dave.
Excellent.
Goodbye.
Hey, thank you so much again for pressing play. As you've heard, great guests on the show. And one thing you didn't hear in this conversation is what? What did you not hear? Think about it for a second. That's right. Not a single solitary commercial for a mattress or a supplement or a whatever you call it. No. Why? Because we don't want to break up the conversation with commercials. So the fact that you're still here means that you are a fan of the show, I'm assuming. So if you want to help to keep the podcast going and to make me feel really happy, all I really care about is coffee, okay? I just got to be honest. I love coffee. I'm drinking one right now. It's starting to get cold. I need to warm it up. Helping us with our Buy Me a Coffee link over at livingthenextchapter.com and also in the show notes helps kind of keep the lights on around here. Remember, I'm doing this for free. I'm paying for everything. So I would love to have a little coffee donation, even $5 kind of fills up my cup. And I would love to enjoy a coffee from you. So if you're interested, again, thank you for listening. But you can use our Buy Me a Coffee link and fill up the cup. Thanks for being here.